Hey everyone, in this video I will show you how to put together an animatic using both Adobe Animate and After Effects. Please keep in mind that an animatic is a rough, timed out video version of a storyboard. It serves as a moving blueprint that bridges the gap between static drawings and the final polished animation. Animatics also incorporates sound effects and music. The first step to creating an animatic is to be organized. Let's create a folder called Animatic. Inside of that Animatic folder will be a folder for your sound effects and music folder. And finally, there should be a folder for your storyboards. Once you have your folders created, let's jump into Adobe Animate. The dimensions for this Adobe Animate project should be 1920 by 1080 and 24 frames per second. Afterwards, you can click on Create. Now we should have a blank canvas. However, since we are creating an animatic, we need our storyboards to create our rough main key poses. In Adobe Animate, you can import images and audio files onto the library. Let's import our boards onto the library. You can do this by hovering to File, Import, Import to Library. Now you are able to import each of your boards. So from the library, I can drag one of the boards onto the canvas. I'll scale down the boards to focus on the first panel. You can also right-click and break the board apart. This allows you to erase the other sections of the storyboard. Now, what we want to do is just to draw out the rough key poses. Of course, we have one layer for the storyboard panel. Let's create two more layers. One for the rough key poses of the character animation and another for the background. Remember, please do not get lost in the details when creating your rough key poses and backgrounds. Animatics are rough. They are designed to test timing, pacing, and camera movements before the costly, time-consuming production phase begins. Once you've created your first shot, you can create an additional scene in this Adobe Animate file. Remember, when creating an animated short, there are multiple scenes and shots. Here in Adobe Animate, you can create multiple scenes in a single Adobe Animate file. You can do this by hovering your mouse to the top and select Window. Now that we have Window selected, let's hover down to Scene. Here is where you can create multiple scenes on an Adobe Animate file. Once you click on Scene, a small window will appear. If you click on the square with the plus icon, you can add a new scene. Now on the second scene, you're able to grab your storyboard from the library section and drag it onto the canvas. And again, you can break it apart and begin adding your rough key poses. Okay, so now that you created your rough key poses and rough backgrounds for each scene, we are going to go to scene 1 and export it as a video. To do this, click on File, Export, Export Video and Media. You can click on the folder icon to change the name of the exported video and export destination. Be sure to check the section that says Start Adobe Media Encoder Render Queue immediately. Once you click on Export, a software called Adobe Media Encoder will open up and convert your Adobe Animate file to a video file. Now, the great thing about exporting it this way is that it allows you to export all of these scenes into a single video. This is why it's extremely important to have all of your scenes in one Adobe Animate file. So let's jump on to After Effects. Dimensions should be 1920 by 1080, frame rate 24 frames per second, and the timing of the composition should be 30 seconds long. Once the project file has been created, let's create a folder on the project section called Sound Effects. This is where your sound and music should be placed. Now let's import our exported animatic video onto After Effects. You can do this by pressing Ctrl-I for Windows or Command-I for Mac. Now let's drop the video onto the timeline, and now you can begin adding your sound effects and music on the timeline as well. Just be sure to import them. So when you're adding your sound effects and music, please be sure to time it out and match it up to that specific scene or action that's being displayed. Now, once you've added your sound effects and music, let's add a time code. Time codes are important in animation and even in live action films or projects that are in the pre-production phase. Time codes allow for editors to accurately incorporate sound, music, and camera movements. Time codes can also allow for supervisors to provide notes to the editors. To add a time code, you must hover up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Next, go into the Effects and Presets section and type in time code. Drag that time code effect onto the adjustment layer, and now you can adjust the size and position of that time code. It's best to have your time code on the bottom section of the video display. The last thing that you should do is to export your animatic from After Effects as a video. You can do this by clicking on File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Click on the blue text next to Output To. This allows you to change the file name and select the export destination. Once you have done so, click on Render and you should be done.